Hello, Ahorja. Welcome to Stories, Legends and Wonders of Árainn. Árainn is also known as Inishmore, the largest of the three Árainn Islands. I'm Dara Malloy, Dara O'Mailia as Gaelic. This is episode 4. I'm now going to bring you on a visit to the site of the famous monastery of St Enda. This monastery was like a seedbed for all the future monasteries that were founded in Ireland, which then of course led on to monasteries being founded all over Europe. Enda, being the patriarch of Irish monasticism, is the source of this whole movement. So let's go. I'd like you to imagine that you're a pilgrim coming to visit this monastery, maybe just to say prayers or to do penance, but maybe also you want to become a monk yourself. Man or woman, you're welcome. So you'd come in on the boat through this gap here. Now, of course, every good saint has to be able to do a few decent miracles. And one of the miracles attributed to St Enda was that he opened up this passage in the middle of the rocks. You can see there's rocks on my left and there's rocks on my right. And the passage in the middle is marked by those pillars on either side. And the boats can come safely through the middle of those pillars and not be up on the rocks. So you're a pilgrim arriving in, and you're going to step up on the ground here, and we're going to walk up now to the monastery. Now here in front of me is the major pilgrim path up to the monastic site itself. And this path is very ancient. You can see it's winding, and at one stage it's higher than the field on the right or on the left. So it's been built up over the years, maybe in order not to be mucky for the pilgrims. But this path is possibly as ancient as the monastery itself, which was founded in 485. So that's like 1500 years ago or thereabouts. So let's walk up it now. On the way, we pass the village well, also the monastery's well. And it's still available today as water, although I wouldn't recommend to drink it without boiling it first. But people in those days were hardy, and they used that water for drinking and for washing and for cooking and for everything else. We're heading now towards the middle of the monastic village itself, coming up through this winding path. Here on my right is the remains of one of the Celtic crosses, a national monument protected. And you can see, if you look closely at it, the lovely carvings on the stone. And you can imagine that one of those stones we saw in St Enda's oratory in the graveyard might fit neatly on the top of it. So that stone there most likely was positioned directly in front of the main church of the monastery. Now, you have to decide which period you're thinking about when you're thinking about a main church and a cross like that, because those crosses generally were only being carved in the 8th and 9th century. But Enda came here at the end of the 5th century. So when they came here first, they would have built makeshift buildings, nothing permanent or lasting. Only gradually did they begin to build stone buildings that lasted over time. So let's imagine we're in the 9th century. That cross has been carved. There's probably other crosses around too. And this main church has been built. And at this stage, of course, Árainn is famous, the Árainn of the saints. And the church is gone now, but you can see the outline of it in the ground. It's quite clear that there was a church there, and underneath that grass are the foundations of it and a lot of the remaining stones from it. No archaeologist has ever dug in this site here, and to me it would be a most amazing place to do an archaeological survey, because it's the heart of the whole story of Irish monasticism, and nobody has ever excavated it yet, so someday maybe they will. So you have the Celtic cross, you have the church, and then directly above that you have the round tower, which again wouldn't have been built until the 8th or 9th century. So let's go up there now. So before I bring you over to the remains of the round tower, I want to show you this. This looks like a holy well, and beside it is an altar. Clearly the well has always been there, but from the time of St Enda, it became associated with Enda. It became, if you like, St Enda's holy well, one of the holiest places, in fact, on the island. And that's because of what happened around it. So it's called Cill Éinne. Now, Cill is a word you've heard me use already, because when we talked about St Gregory and his body being washed ashore, we called the place where it landed Port Daocha, the same word Daoch, the port or the beach of the casket. So the word Daoch means a casket, and in this case Cill Éinne means Enda's casket, but not where his body was buried or anything like that, but a casket or a container. And there's a story attached to that which is beautiful. Enda came with 120 monks. The locals who were living here thought he was attacking the place, and so they confronted him and they were ready to do battle. But they saw the monks didn't have any swords or shields or anything like that, so they were a bit confused. And the two leaders got together, Enda and Corban, the head of the local community, and they started some discussions, some peace negotiations, the way one should work. And they agreed that, okay, if Enda was coming with some new deity, and Corban and his people here had some older deities, let's find out who are the strongest deities. And so they went out on a boat. They sailed over towards Blackhead over there, which is in County Clare. And the agreement was they would bring a casket, there's the word casket, on Daoch, with them, full of oats. And they'd drop it into the water out of the boat. And they'd watch where it sailed. Would it sail way down here, which Corban was sure it would, because Corban knew the seas around here. The currents all flow down that way. They don't flow back here. But sure, of course, the casket full of oats came back here and landed exactly where the pilgrims would arrive. So it was put up here to be worshipped, and it became a holy well that people could honour every time they visited the island. So that's why it's such an important place. It was a sort of a proof within nature that Enda and his monks were meant to come here and to settle, which they did, and they were accepted, and there was no physical battle. So that's the holy well of St Enda, and every pilgrim that comes here must go to the well first and seek a blessing from the well, and then possibly they would visit the hermit cell of St Enda himself, and you know, he gives his name to this village, Cill Éinne. Cill means his hermit cell, and Éinne is the genitive case of Enda. So Enda's cell is what this whole place is called. Now here on my left is a little pathway which actually doesn't lead very far, but it's where the monks used to pray walking up and down, and it's called Cosán na nGael, the footpath of the angels. And it's a clue as to the spirituality of these early monks. They were very into their angels, and angels were beings that communicated between you and the divine. And they brought you messages, and you could send messages with them. So it's a nice idea, and certainly they were full of the idea of angels in those days. And there were angels associated with every church and with every grave of a holy man or woman, and so on. Now I bring you over to the round tower. So this is the remains of the round tower, which would have been built in the 8th or 9th century, and which probably was about 100 metres tall. Am I right there? 100 feet? I can't remember. But it would have been about as tall as the top of the hill behind you there. So, you know, there's people who say that these round towers were built in Ireland in order to be lookout towers for the attacking Vikings. Well, that's not the case here, because they didn't need to build a tower to be able to look out for the Vikings. They could look out from the top of the hill. So clearly there was another purpose for these towers. And one of the clues to them is the Irish word clig hach, which means a bell tower. And I think that's the real clue. When these communities began, they were very small. Even though Enda brought 120 monks here, he divided them up into 10 different groups. So each group only had 12 monks, a bit like Jesus and the 12 apostles. So they weren't big groups, so they didn't need a big church or anything like that. Everything was quite small. But gradually over the centuries, over the decades first and then over the centuries, this place became very famous, and there was no room to accommodate everybody except to build out. And so this place became a village. It extended out maybe about a mile in each direction, and there was still the requirement to pray 7 times a day. You know, that was central to the whole monastic tradition. You prayed at dusk, you prayed at midnight, you prayed at dawn, you prayed at midday, and then at various other times in the day. So somebody was in charge, when it got to this size of a village, somebody had to be in charge of ringing the bell. And in order for everybody to hear the bell and stop wherever they were, they built a tower, and you rang the bell from the top of the tower in the 4 directions. Every tower had 4 windows, 1 in each of the directions. So bell tower is probably the main function of these towers, and then it was also used maybe to watch out for Vikings and also to protect against Vikings, because you'll see here around the bottom of the tower, we only have the first 10 feet left. There's no window and there's no door at the level. So you couldn't get in at ground level, you had to climb up a ladder, possibly a rope ladder or a wooden ladder, which you could pull away. And therefore the things inside, or the people inside, would be relatively safe. So that was another use for the tower, but it wasn't the primary purpose of the tower. So that's the end of episode 4, St Enda's Monastery. I'm now heading up to the top of the hill to a little church called Temple Venain, which has a very interesting story. So that's the next session. My wife, Tess Harper Malloy, has published a new book of her poetry and photographs of Inishmore. So it goes well with this series of videos and talks I'm giving. The name of her book is Inishmore, Poems and Images of Árainn. So naturally enough, she's lived here for almost 40 years now, and she's collected up both the poems and the photographs over that period. So some of the people mentioned in the poems are sadly no longer with us. In fact, some of the buildings she's photographed are no longer with us. But nonetheless, as she says herself, Inishmore is a place that you never forget once you have visited it. And it's a place that sustains you if you choose to live here. So I hope you enjoy the poetry and images in the book if you choose to buy it or to borrow it. It's available from www.ashlingpublications.com, and we're making it available on other platforms as well over time. If you'd like to get more into the story of Pope Gregory and the Celtic monks and the Benedictine rule and the wiping out of Celtic monasticism across Europe and eventually even in Ireland, then it's all contained in my book, The Globalization of God, Celtic Christianity's Nemesis. And if you're interested in these stories about Árainn, you can find all these stories in my book called The Pocket Guide to Árainn, Legends in the Landscape. These 2 books are available on our website, ashlingpublications.com, and you'll find them on other platforms as well.